Captain Jake Morrison looked out at the stars from his ship's control room. The bright lights moved past them as they traveled through space toward the Centauri system. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years now, and he still loved watching. The stars go by. The ship Odyssey was one of the newer exploration vessels that humans used to survey new worlds for the Galactic Federation. Jake felt proud to serve alongside the Zephyrians, the wise alien race that had saved humanity 300 years ago. When Earth was dying, the Zephyrians had come like angels from heaven to rescue the survivors and give them new homes among. The Stars. Commander Lisa Rodriguez walked into the control room carrying a datapad. She was Jake's second in command and one of the best officers he had ever worked with. Lisa had grown up on New Texas, one of the successful mining colonies that humans had built with Zephyrian help. "Captain, I have the latest reports from the Barrens outer colonies," Lisa said as she handed in the pad. "Production numbers are looking good this month. Mining operations on New Colorado pulled up twice as much rare crystal as last month." Jake smiled as he read through the numbers. Human colonies were doing well under Zephyrian guidance. The arrangement worked perfectly for everyone. Humans were good at physical work and could handle dangerous jobs that other alien species found too risky. In return, the Zephyrians protected human worlds from hostile aliens and shared their advanced technology. Dr. Alex Carter was working at his station nearby, studying samples from their last planet survey. Alex was the ship's expert on alien life forms, and he spent most of his time analyzing soil, plants, and creatures from new worlds. He was a quiet man who loved his work and rarely complained about anything. "Doctor, how are those samples looking?" Jake asked. Alex looked up from his microscope and pushed his glasses up his nose. "Very interesting, Captain. The plant life on that last world shows signs of rapid evolution. The Zephyrians were right to mark it for future colonization. In a few years, humans could turn it into excellent farmland." Jake nodded. The Zephyrians always knew which worlds would work best for human settlements. They had been exploring space for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. Their wisdom had guided humanity to prosperity among the stars. Lieutenant Karen Blake was at the navigation station, plotting their course through the next star system. Karen was young, but very skilled at her job. She had joined the crew just 2 years ago, fresh from the Federation Academy on New Earth. Like most young humans, she had grown up hearing stories about the Great Rescue and felt grateful to serve. "The Federation. Lieutenant, what's our next destination?" Jake asked. Karen checked her instruments and replied, "We're heading to the Vega system, Captain. There's an old space station there that went dark about 50 years ago. Command wants us to check it out and see if it's worth salvaging." Jake had heard about the old station. It was built during the early days after the rescue, when humans were still learning how to live in space. Many of those early stations had been abandoned as technology improved and colonies moved to better locations. The journey to Vega took 3 days. During that time, the crew went about their normal duties. Lisa worked on supply reports and crew schedules. Alex studied his samples and prepared for the station survey. Karen kept the ship on course and monitored space traffic. Jake spent his time reading reports from other human colonies. New California was having great success growing food crops that could feed millions. New York Station was manufacturing components for Federation starships. New Australia was mining precious metals that powered advanced alien technology. Everything seemed perfect in the human corner of the galaxy. Humans had good jobs, safe homes, and the protection of the mighty Zephyrian fleet. Children grew up healthy and educated in Federation schools. Crime was almost unknown on human worlds, and everyone had enough food and shelter. When they reached the Vega system, Jake could see the old station floating in space like a dead whale. It was much larger than modern stations, built with the heavy, clunky style of early human space construction. Solar panels stuck out in all directions, and communication dishes pointed toward long-forgotten destinations. "Take us in slowly, Karen," Jake ordered. "We don't know what condition that station is in." As they got closer, Jake could see that the station was in better shape than expected. The hull looked solid, and some of the solar panels were still collecting sunlight. There might be power still running in some sections. "Alex, Lisa, gear up for station inspection," Jake said. "Karen, you stay here and monitor our communications." The three officers put on their spacesuits and took a small shuttle over to the station. They found a docking port that still worked and managed to connect their shuttle safely. The station's airlock was old but functional. Inside the station, emergency lights provided dim illumination in the corridors. The air was stale but breathable. Jake led the way, while Lisa and Alex followed with scanning equipment and sample containers. "This place gives me the creeps," Lisa said as they walked through empty hallways. "It's like a ghost town." The station had living quarters, work areas, laboratories, and storage rooms. Everything was covered in dust, but the equipment looked like it had been abandoned quickly rather than properly shut down. In some rooms, they found personal belongings still. Sitting on desks and tables, Alex was examining some of the laboratory equipment when he made an interesting discovery. "Captain, these labs were doing some kind of historical research. Look at all these data storage units." Jake came over to see what Alex had found. There were dozens of data cores stacked on shelves, each one labeled with dates and reference numbers. Some of the labels mentioned Earth and pre-rescue history. "Can we access any of this data?" Jake asked. Alex connected his portable computer to one of the storage units. After a few minutes of work, he managed to power up the system and start reading the files. "Most of the data is corrupted," Alex said, "but there are some fragments that are still readable. It looks like they were studying communications from old Earth." Jake was curious about what kind of communications they might find. Historical records from before the rescue were rare. The Zephyrians had explained that most of Earth's data was lost when the planet systems failed. Meanwhile, Karen was exploring a different section of the station. She had found what looked like a main computer center with banks of processors and communication equipment. Some of the machines were still running on backup power. Karen was good with computer systems, so she started trying to access the main database. It took her over an hour to figure out the old security codes, but eventually she managed to get into the system files. What she found there would change everything they thought they knew about their history. Deep in the station's memory banks, Karen discovered fragments of transmissions that had been sent from Earth just before the rescue. The messages were incomplete and damaged, but what she could read made her heart race with fear and confusion. The transmissions talked about Earth as a thriving world with billions of people. They mentioned advanced technology and plans for interstellar exploration. Most shocking of all, they described the arrival of alien ships not as rescuers, but as invaders. Karen read the fragments over and over, hoping she was misunderstanding something. But the more she read, the clearer it became that everything humans had been told about their history was wrong. Earth had not been dying when the Zephyrians arrived. The planet had been healthy and full of life, and the Zephyrians had not come as friends. Karen Blake stared at the computer screen with shaking hands. The words she was reading could not be real. They had to be some kind of mistake or corruption in the old data files. But as she read more fragments, the horrible truth became clearer. She called Jake on her communicator with a voice that trembled. "Captain, you need to come to the main computer center right now. I found something that you have to see." Jake heard the fear in Karen's voice and immediately left Alex and Lisa in the laboratory. He hurried through the empty corridors to find Karen sitting in front of a wall of old computer screens. Her face was pale and her eyes were wide with Shock. What did you find, Lieutenant? Jake asked as he approached her station. Karen pointed to the screen without looking at him. Captain, these are communications from Earth right before the rescue, but they don't match what we were taught in school. They don't match anything we know about our history. Jake leaned over to read the text on the screen. The first message. Fragment was dated exactly 300 years ago. It read, Day 847 since the alien ships arrived in orbit. They refuse all attempts at communication. Our space defense grid is completely destroyed. Military forces report enemy ground troops landing in major cities across all continents. Jake felt his stomach drop as he read the words. This has to be corrupted data, Karen. The Zephyrians came to rescue us from a dying planet. Karen switched to another file fragment. Captain, look at this one. It's from the Global Communications Center in Geneva. The message said, population. Centers are being systematically destroyed. Estimated casualties now exceed 2 billion. The alien weapons are unlike anything we have ever seen. They are not here to make contact. This is an invasion. Jake's mind raced as he tried to understand what he was reading. Everything they had been taught said that Earth was dying from pollution and war when the Zephyrians arrived. The planet supposedly had less than 1 billion people left, and they were grateful to be rescued. Show me more, Jake said quietly. Karen pulled up file after file. Each one painted the same horrible picture. Earth had been a thriving world with over 12 billion people. The planet had clean oceans, growing forests, and advancing technology. Humans were on the verge of developing their own interstellar travel when the Zephyrians arrived. One message fragment from the European Space Agency read, Our deep space telescopes detected the alien fleet 6 months ago. We tried to send peaceful greetings, but they ignored all communications. The ships that entered our system are definitely military vessels. We count at least 2,000 warships. Another fragment from the American Space Command said, Enemy forces have targeted all major cities, spaceports, and communication centers. They are not trying to occupy our world. They are trying to destroy our civilization completely. Jake called Alex and Lisa to join them in the computer center. When they arrived, they found Jake sitting in silence while Karen continued to search through the old files. What's going on? Lisa asked. You both look like you've seen a ghost. Jake looked up at his officers with haunted eyes. Lisa, Alex, I need you to sit down. What Karen found here is going to change everything we believe about our history. Alex. And Lisa sat down while Jake explained what they had discovered. As he talked, their faces went through the same changes that his had. First confusion, then disbelief, then growing horror as the truth became clear. That's impossible, Alex said when Jake finished. The Zephyrians saved us. They're our friends and protectors. They've been taking care of humanity for 300 years. Karen had found more files while Jake was talking. Doctor, look at this communication from the World Health Organization. It says the planet's environment was actually improving before the aliens came. Air quality was the best it had been in a century. Ocean pollution was dropping every year. Lisa shook her head. But we learned in school that Earth was dying. The air was poison, and the oceans were dead. That's why only a few million humans could be saved. Karen pulled up another file. According to these records, Earth had 12,300,000,000 people when the Zephyrians arrived. The last message from the Global Emergency Network says that over 11 billion people were killed in the first month of fighting. The 4 humans sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of the lie became clear. Everything they had been taught about their history was false. The Zephyrians had not come as saviors. They had come as conquerors who committed the greatest genocide. In Human History. Alex was the first to speak again. If this is true, then what happened to all the people who weren't rescued? What really happened to Earth? Karen searched through more files and found partial records from the final days. The messages get more desperate toward the end. Here's one from the International Space Station. Surface of the planet is now uninhabitable. The aliens used some kind of atmospheric weapon that turned the air toxic. Anyone still on the surface will be dead within hours. Jake read over her shoulder as she found the last transmission from Earth. This is Dr. Margaret Hughes broadcasting from the underground. Shelter in Colorado. We are the last survivors we know of. The aliens have been gone for 3 days. They took approximately 600,000 people from various locations around the world. Everyone else is dead. The planet's atmosphere is completely poisoned. This will be our final transmission. The silence in the computer center was broken only by the humming of old machines. 4 humans sat staring at evidence that their entire species had been built on a lie. The Zephyrians had not saved humanity. They had destroyed it and then kidnapped a small number of survivors to use as slaves. Lisa was the first to recover from the shock. We have to tell someone about this. Command needs to know. Jake shook his head. Tell them what? That everything the Federation is built on is a lie? That our supposed allies are actually the ones who murdered 11 billion of our ancestors? Who would believe us? Alex had been thinking about the implications. Captain, if the Zephyrians lied about the rescue, what else have they lied about? What about the hostile alien species they protect us from? What about the colony locations they chose for us? Karen was already searching for more answers in the station's database. I'm finding references to something called Project Containment. It looks like it was a Zephyrian plan for managing the human survivors. She opened the files and began reading. What she found was even more disturbing than the truth about Earth's destruction. Project Containment was a detailed plan for controlling the human population. Every human colony had been deliberately placed in locations that were difficult to escape from. The Zephyrians had chosen worlds that were surrounded by natural barriers or dangerous space phenomena. Look at this, Karen said. New Colorado is surrounded by an asteroid field that makes space travel almost impossible. New Texas is located near a neutron star that interferes with long-range communications. New California is in a system with solar radiation that damages most types of spacecraft engines. Jake studied the colony placement maps. They put us in prisons. Every single human world is designed to keep us trapped. Alex found more disturbing information. Captain, according to these files, the dangerous working conditions in human colonies are completely artificial. The Zephyrians have technology that could make mining and construction completely safe, but they deliberately don't use it on human worlds. Lisa discovered the most chilling detail of all. The hostile alien species that supposedly threaten our colonies don't exist. The Zephyrians made them up to keep us dependent on their protection. Every human who died defending our worlds died, fighting fake enemies. The 4 officers looked at each other as the full scope of the deception became clear. Humanity had been enslaved for 3 centuries, but the slavery was so complete that most humans believed they were free. The Zephyrians had not just conquered their bodies. They had conquered their minds, and their history. Jake made a decision that would change the course of human history. We're taking copies of all this data back to the ship. We need to study it carefully and figure out what to do next. As they prepared to leave the station, Karen made one final discovery that filled them all with hope. Hidden in the deepest files was a message from the resistance fighters who had built the station. They had known the truth and had been working to preserve it for future generations to find. The message was simple but powerful. To whoever finds this record, know that humanity was not always slaves. We were once free, and we can be free again. The truth is the first weapon in the fight for liberation. Jake Morrison had not slept well since returning from the abandoned station 3 days ago. The truth about humanity's past burned in his mind like a fire that would not go out. Every time he looked at his crew, he wondered how many other humans were living the same lie without knowing it. Dr. Alex Carter had been working day and night to analyze all the data they had copied from the station. He had set up a secure computer system in his laboratory that was completely separate from the ship's main network. They could not risk the Zephyrians discovering what they had learned. "Captain," Alex said when Jake came to check on his progress, "I've been going through the historical records, and the picture is even worse than we first thought. The Zephyrians didn't just destroy Earth once. They've done this to dozens of other species." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" Alex pulled up files on his screen that showed star maps and population records. According to these documents, the Zephyrians have been conquering worlds for thousands of years. They find species that are about to develop interstellar travel, destroy their homeworlds, and then enslave the survivors. We're not their first victims, Captain. We're just their most recent ones. The door to the laboratory opened, and Lisa Rodriguez walked in carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired. She had been working with Karen to establish secure communications with other human ships and colonies. The job was dangerous because they had to avoid Zephyrian monitoring systems. "Any luck reaching other humans?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded, but looked worried. "We made contact with Captain Frank Wilson on the cargo ship Liberty. At first he thought we were crazy, but when we sent him some of the data files, he started asking his own questions. He's discovered that the cargo routes his ship follows don't make sense for normal trade." Jake sat down to hear more. "What kind of routes?" "Frank's ship carries supplies between human colonies, but the routes are designed to take 3 times longer than necessary. The Zephyrians claim it's for safety, but Frank realized they're actually designed to prevent humans from learning how close our worlds really are to each other." Alex looked up from his computer. "That fits with what I found about colony placement. The human worlds form a triangle in space that would make communication and travel between them very easy. But the Zephyrians have convinced every colony that they're isolated and far from help." Karen Blake entered the laboratory with more news from her communication efforts. Her young face looked older than it had a week ago, aged by the terrible knowledge they now carried. "Captain, I made contact with the mining station on New Colorado," Karen said. "I spoke with Chief Engineer Betty Adams. When I told her about the safety equipment the Zephyrians have been withholding, she started checking her records. She found evidence that 300 miners died last year from accidents that could have been easily prevented." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. 300 people had died because their supposed protectors wanted to keep humans in dangerous working conditions. "What else did you learn?" "Betty is going to quietly contact other mining supervisors and engineers. She thinks they can prove that almost every human who has died in industrial accidents was killed by deliberate Zephyrian negligence." Lisa had more disturbing news from her contacts. "I also reached Dr. Paul Martinez on New Geneva. He's the head doctor at the main medical facility there. When I told him about the genetic treatments, he immediately started reviewing patient records." "What did he find?" Alex asked. "The treatments that all human children receive aren't protecting them from alien diseases. Dr. Martinez found that the treatments are actually making changes to human brain chemistry. They're designed to make people more obedient and less likely to question authority." Jake slammed his fist on the laboratory table. "They've been poisoning our children for 3 centuries. They've been breeding the fight out of us generation by generation." Alex had discovered something else in the historical records. "Captain, there's more. I found references to humans who refused the treatments or who showed signs of resistance to the conditioning. They were all sent to what the Zephyrians called special colonies for retraining." "What happened to them?" Karen asked. "According to these records, none of them were ever seen again. The Zephyrians have been quietly eliminating any humans who showed signs of independence or rebellion. The 4 officers sat in silence as they realized the full scope of the system designed to control humanity. Every aspect of human life had been carefully managed to prevent them from ever becoming free again. Lisa broke the silence. We need to tell more people. The question is how to do it without getting everyone killed. Jake had been thinking about this problem since they first discovered the truth. We need to be smart about this. If we try to tell everyone at once, the Zephyrians will stop us before we can reach most people. We need to build a network slowly and carefully. Alex had an idea. Captain, what if we use the old Earth coding systems? The Zephyrians never bothered to learn them because they thought human culture was primitive. We could send messages that look like normal communications, but actually contain the truth. Karen was excited by the idea. I know those old codes from my history classes. We could embed the real messages inside routine reports and supply requests. Over the next several days, they began reaching out to humans across the galaxy. Jake used his position as a ship captain to visit other vessels and stations. During normal meetings and conversations, he found ways to share small pieces of information that would make other humans start asking questions. Lisa contacted her friends and former classmates who now worked on different human worlds. She shared the historical data files disguised as academic research about pre-rescue Earth culture. Many of the people she contacted were scientists and teachers who were naturally curious about human history. Dr. Alex Carter reached out to other doctors and researchers throughout human space. He shared his findings about the genetic treatments as medical research that needed peer review. The doctors who received his data quickly began conducting their own investigations. Karen used her skills with communication systems to establish a secure network that could pass messages between human colonies without Zephyrian detection. She trained other communications officers on different ships and stations to use the same techniques. Within 3 weeks, they had made contact with humans on every major colony and space station. The response was always the same. First shock and disbelief, then careful investigation, and finally growing anger as the truth became undeniable. On the farming world of New Kansas, agricultural supervisor Helen Gray made a horrifying discovery. The fertilizers that human farmers had been using for decades were not designed to help crops grow better. They were slowly poisoning the soil to make it dependent on Zephyrian chemicals. Without the alien fertilizers, the soil would become completely barren within a few years. Mining foreman Tony Walker on the asteroid belt discovered that the dangerous working conditions were completely artificial. The Zephyrians had technology that could make the mines completely safe, but they deliberately created hazards to keep human workers afraid and obedient. Every human who had died in a mining accident had been murdered by negligence. Dr. Rebecca Stone at the medical facility on New Geneva found the most disturbing evidence of all. The genetic treatments given to human children were not just making them more obedient. They were also designed to shorten human lifespans and reduce fertility rates. The Zephyrians were slowly driving humanity toward extinction while using them as slave labor. But the most important discovery came from an unexpected source. Engineer Ben Phillips, working on the space dock at New York Station, noticed something strange about the ships that humans were allowed to build and operate. They were all designed with hidden weaknesses that would make them easy for Zephyrian forces to disable or destroy. Every human ship has secret vulnerabilities built into its systems. Ben reported through the secure network. The Zephyrians made sure that we could never use our own vessels to fight against them or escape from their control. As more humans learned the truth, something unexpected began to happen. The genetic conditioning that was supposed to keep them obedient started to break down. Dr. Stone discovered that knowledge of the truth seemed to reverse some of the chemical changes in human brains. When people learned that they were slaves, Their natural human instincts for freedom began to reassert themselves. Jake realized that they had reached a critical point. The network of awakened humans was growing larger every day, but they could not keep their activities secret much longer. Soon the Zephyrians would notice that something was wrong. It was time to move from gathering information to taking action. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the cargo bay of his ship, looking at the faces of 12 other human officers who had answered his secret call. They had come from different ships and stations across the sector, all of them now knowing the terrible truth about their history. The time for careful planning and quiet investigation was over. Commander Lisa Rodriguez had spent the last 2 weeks coordinating with resistance cells on every human world. The network they had built was larger than any of them had imagined possible. Nearly half of all humans in the galaxy now knew the truth about their enslavement. "The situation is getting dangerous," Lisa reported to the group. 3 of our people on New California have disappeared. The Zephyrians are starting to notice that something is wrong. Chief Engineer Patricia Hayes from the mining station had traveled 2 days to reach this meeting. She was a tough woman who had spent 15 years working in the dangerous asteroid mines. Her face was grim as she spoke. "We can't wait any longer," Patricia said. "Every day we delay, more humans die in those death traps they call mines. Yesterday, we lost 8 people. In an accident that could have been prevented with technology the Zephyrians have had for centuries." Dr. Rebecca Stone had brought disturbing news from the medical facilities. The genetic treatments are getting stronger. The Zephyrians have started giving triple doses to children on some worlds. They're trying to make the conditioning permanent before too many people wake up. Tactical Officer Daniel Wright had been studying Zephyrian military systems for weeks. He was a quiet man who had served in the Federation fleet for 10 years, but now he was ready to turn those skills against his former allies. "I've identified weaknesses in their defensive networks," Daniel said. "The Zephyrians have grown lazy after 3 centuries of controlling us. Their security systems are designed to watch for outside threats, not rebellion from within." Jake looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had once been loyal Federation officers. Now they were something the galaxy had never seen. Before, humans who knew they were slaves and were ready to fight for their freedom. "What's our current strength?" Jake asked. Communications Officer Ryan Brooks had been tracking the growth of their network. "We have active cells on 47 human worlds and stations. That includes about 60,000 people who are ready to act when we give the signal." Engineer Ben Phillips had spent weeks studying the ships and equipment that humans were allowed to operate. "The good news is that we've figured out how to disable the hidden weaknesses in our vessels. The bad news is that we're still heavily outnumbered by Zephyrian military forces." Jake had been thinking about this problem for days. "We don't need to match their numbers. We need to be smarter than they are. The Zephyrians have never faced a coordinated human resistance. They don't know what we're capable of when we're fighting for our freedom." Dr. Alex Carter had made an important discovery about human biology. "There's something the Zephyrians don't understand about the genetic changes they made to us. The modifications were supposed to make us weaker and more obedient, but they had an unexpected side effect." "What kind of side effect?" Patricia asked. "The changes created a form of quantum connection between human minds. When one person learns the truth and breaks free from the conditioning, it makes it easier for others to do the same. The awakening is spreading faster than we could have imagined." Lisa had been coordinating with cells across the galaxy and had seen this effect firsthand. Alex is right. On New Texas, we told 50 people the truth, and within a week, over 3,000 people had awakened without any direct contact from us. Jake realized this gave them a tremendous advantage. If the awakening can spread on its own, then we need to focus on disrupting the systems that keep humans separated and isolated. Daniel had been studying Zephyrian control methods. The key is their monitoring and communication networks. If we can knock out their ability to coordinate between different human worlds, we can move freely while they're blind. The plan they developed was simple but ambitious. Human resistance cells would simultaneously attack Zephyrian monitoring stations, communication relays, and administrative centers across the galaxy. The goal was not to defeat the Zephyrian military immediately, but to break their control system and allow the awakening to spread to every human in the galaxy dot over the next week. Jake and his team visited resistance cells on different worlds to coordinate the attacks. On each world, they found humans who were ready to risk everything for the chance at freedom. On New Colorado, mining supervisor Tony Walker had organized his workers into a fighting force. "We've been working in these death traps for generations," Tony told Jake. "We know every tunnel, every piece of equipment, every weak point in their operation. When the time comes, we'll shut down every mine in the system." Agricultural supervisor Helen Gray on New Kansas had turned her farming communities into resistance cells. "The Zephyrians poisoned our soil to make us dependent on them," Helen said. "But we've found ways to neutralize their chemicals. We can make our world self-sufficient again." Dr. Paul Martinez on New Geneva had organized the medical staff into a network that could treat wounded resistance fighters and help reverse the genetic conditioning. "We've developed treatments that can undo most of the brain chemistry changes," Paul reported. "Once people are free from the conditioning, they stay free." The most important development came from an unexpected source. Navigation officer Amy Foster, working on a cargo ship, had discovered something that changed everything. While studying star charts for the resistance, she found that the Zephyrian home system was much closer to human space than anyone had been. Told, "Captain, the Zephyrian homeworld is only 6 days away from New Earth," Amy reported through the secure network. "They told us it was months of travel, but that was another lie to keep us from trying to reach it." Jake realized that this discovery opened up possibilities they had never considered. If we can reach their homeworld, we can strike at the heart of their empire. Engineer Kevin Miller, working on New Detroit, had been secretly modifying human ships to remove their built-in weaknesses. "I've figured out how to turn our cargo vessels into warships," Kevin reported. "The Zephyrians never expected humans to modify their own equipment, so they don't have defenses against our ships when they're operating at full capacity." The resistance network was growing so fast that it was becoming difficult to keep track of all the cells. Humans who had never shown any sign of rebellion were suddenly becoming fierce fighters for freedom. The genetic conditioning that was supposed to keep them obedient was breaking down everywhere. Dr. Stone made a discovery that explained what was happening. The quantum connection between human minds is getting stronger as more people awaken. It's like a chain reaction that's spreading across the entire species. Jake called a final meeting of the resistance leadership. They gathered on an abandoned mining platform in the asteroid belt, far from any Zephyrian monitoring systems. Representatives from 50 human worlds attended in person or through secure communications. "The time has come," Jake announced to the assembled group. "In 72 hours, every human resistance cell will strike simultaneously. We'll target their monitoring systems, their administrative centers, and their control networks. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late to stop us." Patricia Hayes spoke for the mining worlds. "The industrial facilities are ready. We'll shut down every operation that benefits the Zephyrians and turn our equipment into weapons." Helen Gray represented the agricultural worlds. "The farming communities will cut off all food supplies to Zephyrian forces and begin feeding the resistance instead." Dr. Martinez spoke for the medical facilities. "We'll treat our wounded and help more people break free from the conditioning. Every person we save becomes another fighter for freedom." Daniel Wright had the most ambitious assignment: a strike. Force of modified human ships will attack the Zephyrian homeworld while their attention is focused on putting down rebellions throughout human space. Jake looked around the room at the faces of humans who had been slaves just months ago and were now ready to fight for their freedom. The Zephyrians had made a fatal mistake when they underestimated human determination. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity finally said no. The attack began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time, across 47 human worlds simultaneously. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his modified ship as explosions lit up the Zephyrian monitoring station on New Earth. After 300 years of slavery, humanity was finally fighting back. On New Colorado, mining supervisor Tony Walker led his workers in seizing control of the asteroid mining facilities. The Zephyrians had built these stations to be operated by human labor, never imagining that the workers would one day turn the heavy mining equipment into weapons. "Target the communication relay first," Tony shouted over the noise of mining lasers, cutting through Zephyrian metal. "If they can't call for help, they can't coordinate their response." The mining lasers that had been used to cut asteroids for centuries proved devastatingly effective against Zephyrian equipment. Within 30 minutes, every monitoring device and communication system in the asteroid belt was destroyed. Agricultural. Supervisor Helen Gray was leading a different kind of attack on New Kansas. Her farming communities had secretly stockpiled food and water while poisoning the supplies that were supposed to go to Zephyrian forces. "The soil treatment facilities are secure," Helen reported through the resistance network. "We've reversed the chemical poisoning and cut off all food shipments to their military bases." The Zephyrians had designed their control system to rely on human cooperation. They had never built enough of their own personnel to directly manage every human world. When humans stopped cooperating and started fighting, the alien control system collapsed rapidly. Dr. Rebecca Stone and her medical teams were working frantically to treat resistance fighters and help more humans break free from the genetic conditioning. The quantum connection between human minds was growing stronger with each person who awakened. "We're seeing mass awakenings on every world," Dr. Stone reported. "The conditioning is breaking down faster than we can treat people. It's like the entire human species is waking up at once." Engineer Patricia Hayes had turned the industrial facilities on New Detroit into weapons factories. The same machines that had been building equipment for the Zephyrians were now producing weapons for the human resistance. "Production lines are running at full capacity," Patricia announced. "We're building everything from small arms to ship weapons. The Zephyrians taught us how to manufacture their technology, and now we're using it against them." The most crucial part of the plan was happening in space, where Tactical Officer Daniel Wright was leading a strike force toward the Zephyrian homeworld. The ships in his fleet had been cargo vessels and mining ships just days ago, but engineer Kevin Miller had modified them into formidable warships. "All ships report ready for jump to the Zephyrian system," Daniel announced to his fleet. "Remember, our goal is not just military victory. We're fighting for justice for 11 billion murdered humans." The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 6 days, just as Navigation Officer Amy Foster had calculated. During the trip, the human fleet received constant updates from the resistance cells across the galaxy. Every human world was now in open rebellion. The Zephyrians were trying to respond to dozens of simultaneous attacks, but their forces were spread too thin. They had relied on fear and deception to control humans for so long that they were not prepared for organized military resistance. The human fleet arrived at the Zephyrian homeworld. They found a planet that was beautiful but heavily defended. Massive space stations orbited the world, and hundreds of warships patrolled the system. "Enemy fleet detected," Communications Officer Ryan Brooks reported. "They're moving to intercept us." The space battle that followed would be remembered for centuries as the moment when humanity proved they could not be kept as slaves forever. The Zephyrian ships were more advanced, but they were operated by aliens, who had grown soft and weak from centuries of easy victory. The human ships were crewed by people who had worked in dangerous conditions their entire lives. Mining engineers, who knew how to operate heavy equipment under pressure. Cargo pilots who could navigate through asteroid fields and solar storms. Workers who had been forced to risk their lives every day for alien masters. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessel, Daniel ordered. Take out their coordination, and the rest of their fleet will be confused. The modified mining lasers and industrial equipment that the humans had turned into weapons proved surprisingly effective against Zephyrian shields. The aliens had designed their defenses to stop conventional military weapons, not improvised tools wielded by desperate humans. Captain Jake Morrison was coordinating the battle from his command ship when he received an unexpected communication. The Zephyrian fleet commander was trying to surrender. Human vessels, this is Admiral Zeth of the Zephyrian Defense Force. The alien voice said through the communicator. We request immediate ceasefire and negotiations. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were people who had learned that their entire species had been enslaved and lied to for 3 centuries. They had discovered that 11 billion of their ancestors had been murdered by the aliens who now wanted to negotiate. Admiral Zeth, Jake replied, you had 300 years to negotiate with humanity. The time for talks ended when we learned the truth about what you did to our homeworld. The battle continued until the last Zephyrian warship was either destroyed or surrendering. The orbital defense stations fell one by one to human weapons that had been built from mining and industrial equipment. When the fighting ended, the human fleet controlled the space around the Zephyrian homeworld. For the first time in 3 centuries, humans held the power to decide the fate of another species. Commander Lisa Rodriguez had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy during the battle. Captain, we're receiving reports from all human worlds. The rebellion has succeeded everywhere. Every Zephyrian facility is either destroyed or under human control. Dr. Alex Carter had been analyzing the data they captured from Zephyrian computers during the battle. Captain, we now have complete records of their crimes. They've destroyed 47 different species over the last 5,000 years. We're not their only victims. Jake made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Instead of destroying the Zephyrian homeworld in revenge, he chose a different path. Admiral Zeth, you and your people are going to face justice for your crimes, Jake announced. But we are not going to become monsters like you. We will not commit genocide. The humans established control over the Zephyrian homeworld and began the process of holding trials for war crimes. The aliens who had enslaved humanity and destroyed dozens of other species would face legal punishment, not extermination. More importantly, the humans began searching for survivors of the other species that the Zephyrians had destroyed, using captured alien records. They found hidden slave populations scattered across the galaxy. Species that the galaxy thought were extinct had actually been enslaved, just like humanity. Engineer Ben Phillips led the effort to rebuild the worlds that had been damaged by Zephyrian weapons. We have the technology to restore these planets, Ben announced. We can bring back the worlds they destroyed and give the survivors their homes again. Dr. Stone worked to develop treatments that could reverse the genetic damage done to enslaved populations. Every species they modified can be healed, she reported. We can undo centuries of biological slavery. The Zephyrian homeworld became a monument to the victims of their empire. The aliens themselves were relocated to a harsh but habitable world where they would learn to survive through honest work instead of slavery and conquest. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the space station that now orbited the former Zephyrian capital. Through the window, he could see ships from a dozen different species that humans had liberated from slavery. Commander Rodriguez joined him at the window. Hard to believe it's only been 6 months since we found that abandoned station. Jake nodded. 6 months since we learned the truth. 3 centuries of lies, ended by humans who refused to stay slaves. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity could be enslaved, lied to, and oppressed, but they could not be kept down forever. When humans finally learned the truth and decided to fight for their freedom, no force in the universe could stop them. The age of human slavery was over. The age of human justice had begun.